I know what you're thinking. Who cares if Monster Hunter Wilds has a good narrative? You're here to stab monsters with an exploding sword in order to carve them up for parts to make an even better exploding sword and some sick armor along with it. And I'd say you're right, for the most part. The story doesn't really matter. I've played about 50 hours of Monster Hunter Wilds, and if I were to review the full package, I'd slap an 8 out of 10 on it and call it a day. It's a great game. But I'm also someone that believes video games are the best way to tell stories. No other medium allows you to place yourself within the narrative. However, game development is a beast as bloated and ugly as a Rompo Polo. Thus, stories are often the first thing developers carve up to meet deadlines. And with Monster Hunter Wilds, Capcom is clearly going for a more narrative-heavy approach. They've put characters like Alma and Gemma here at the forefront of promotional media, and if you've at least played the beta, you've likely experienced the well-done story-focused cutscenes for yourself. However, after completing all the main story quests, which ran me about 20 hours, I came away thoroughly disappointed in what Capcom put together here. Much like the monsters you defeat, Capcom carved up some themes of ecological balance, but instead of reassembling them into sweet-looking armor with great skills and a high defense stat, they produced a gaudy, mismatched outfit that couldn't save you from a Chatacabra's tongue, let alone a Rathalos' flame. Let's get the good out of the way first. Monster Hunter Wilds environments feel truly alive, with tons of non-threatening endemic life about. These environments dramatically shift between a season of plenty and a season of fallow, with an awesome inclement weather event in between. More notably, the monsters themselves have so much character packed into their animations that I put them on par with iconic creatures of other games, like your Pikachus and Slimes. The base foundation of any good story, a lived-in setting that you want to invest yourself into, is here, refined after a couple of decades of Monster Hunter games. So how did Capcom fail to write a story of any substance upon this foundation? Let's start at the beginning. The story opens strong with a prologue cutscene in which the Hunters Guild discovers this boy named Nata at the edge of the Forbidden Lands, an area previously thought uninhabited. Nata fled his home when a monster called the White Wraith attacked. Fast forward a few years, it's never explicitly said how much time has passed, and the Hunters Guild returns with Nata in tow to find his people. Here you meet the core cast. Capcom upped its game when it comes to visual character design this time around, including an in-depth character creator that birthed my purple mustachioed hunter here. Your hunter is almost fully voiced, though despite featuring prominently in cutscenes, he or she won't have any agency over the story. Instead, you're a weapon for the rest of the cast to point at the monster of the hour. Personally, I can deal with a game making my character a pseudo-protagonist like this, if that story is really good. The rest of your core entourage is made up of Alma, Gemma, and Nata. Unfortunately, of these characters, and the many that you meet after, only Nata receives any semblance of characterization. I'll talk more about Nata at length later, but take Alma for example. She's an earnest guild handler that tags along with you for pretty much every quest, and that's about it. She faces no personal conflict and no motivation is given for her to keep on exploring these dangerous, untamed lands. She says during some throwaway dialogue that she closed herself off from the world until she met Nata, but nothing comes of this line. Gemma, on the other hand, has a clear motivation for being there. She has a lust for new technologies that uncontacted peoples might reveal to her. But again, that's all she ever is. An excitable nerd about armors and weapons and nothing more. She too doesn't change at all over the lengthy narrative. Both her and Alma remain static, two-dimensional, and thus utterly forgettable aside from their appearances. There's another group of hunters led by this woman named Olivia, and despite being quite the badass, she gets a few cool cutscenes where she whacks monsters with her hammer, she too faces no personal challenge or growth. Joining her are Eric and Werner. The former gets himself into trouble trying to research flora and fauna, and the latter is a technological whiz whose defining trait is that he's a massive dick. Again, utterly forgettable. So right after you create your character and meet the cast, you rescue another young child, not Nata, being chased by a group of Balahara. Your hunter leaps into action, taking the Balahara down and saving this young girl named Nona. She's of another uncontacted tribe, not the one Nata belongs to, and her brother is also in trouble. Squaring off against a Chatacabra to save her brother Yasai, the story begins in earnest. The bulk of it sees you and your core group helping out the tribal peoples of the Windward Plains, Scarlet Forest, and Oilwell Basin. For a land thought uninhabited, you make the acquaintance of a lot of people, making the narrative feel less, well, wild. This may or may not bother you, but for me personally, I found it hampered that feeling of adventuring into the unknown. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that Wild's predecessor, Monster Hunter Rise, nails exploring the unknown much better, as its regions aren't filled with people. Anyway, these people have never seen hunters before, and they instead survive by making use of the local environments to avoid the treacherous beasts that roam their lands. However, these ecosystems have gotten out of sync, requiring your hunter to bounce from village to village, slaying rampaging monsters before they cause harm to the defenseless. Typically, this is after a major lightning sandstorm or a flooding in the region, seemingly caused by an out-of-control apex monster. Through doing this, the cutscenes and dialogue really hammer home the importance of the ecological balance between monsters and their environment. As your hunter is capable of killing monsters, the local people lean on you to do so, which is fine. The game is called Monster Hunter after all. They also lean on your pals to figure out why the environment is all out of whack as well, and the quest to exactly find out why takes up the first 2/3 of the story. I thought this whole setup had a lot of promise, but Capcom doesn't really take it anywhere. The people of this world just let these foreign hunters walk in, start butchering monsters important to their environment, and do nothing but cheer on the slaughter. There's no repercussions for killing a Chatakabra like triggering more dangerous Doshoguma moving into the area, nor is there any tension between you, your friends, and the locals. Everyone is happy with what you're doing, so it feels like a massive missed opportunity. There's a very out-of-place scene where the guards to this village clearly do not want you or your guild there. However, this distrust is never seen again, leading me to believe that some form of antagonism with the locals was originally in the script. Even still, you may think I'm reaching here, but Capcom does lean into the repercussions of hunting monsters a little later. But they wrap those story threads around Nata instead of the tribes you're helping. Again, I'll get to him soon. Capcom introduces far too many side characters when you're bouncing around between these villages, slaying Lalabarinas and Doshagumas and indiscriminately saving the day. For example, they introduced this character from the same village as Yasai and Nona, the siblings that you rescue during the opening sequence, and he adds absolutely nothing to the narrative. It would have been much better to have Yasai return, a character we've already met, to maybe just get a little attached to him, but he's simply punted to the side for this guy. As a result, you don't really get to know either of them. At the same time, when they do introduce a character like this well-spoken off-brand Ewok in a wizard hat, they do so little with him. I really wish he was along for the ride more. Anyway, the lack of any significant attachment to these people and the fact that you always save the day, preventing massacres, restoring the forest's natural order, kickstarting a fire festival, and so on, undermines the danger plaguing these forbidden lands. Nobody dies when the Doshaguma rip this village apart. Indeed, when you return once the quest is complete, everything is back to normal. There's zero stakes, and as a result, the whole adventure is diluted. So just before we move on to Nata's role, I'd just like to say thanks for watching this far. My channel is fairly small and these videos take a ton of work, so if you'd be so kind to shoot me a like, I'd like that. Anyway, on to Nata, and I'm about to get a little bit irate here. So I thought Nata's quest to find the White Wraith and his lost people might redeem the last third of the story. It serves as a background to all the monster slaying up until this point, as the tribes don't know much about Nata or his secretive tribe. And to be honest, I wasn't too put off by what I experienced so far. Wilds continually introduces new monsters in some slick cutscenes that had me looking forward to the next quest, no matter how undercooked the story felt. But man, I definitely did not enjoy the final third. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Before you reach Nata's people, you bump into the White Wraith a couple of times as you help out the tribes. The first time is when it seems to absorb the energy of an Uthduna with chain-like appendages in the Scarlet Forest. And then it kind of absorbs the energy of a Rei Dao in an epic confrontation in the Windward Plains. This energy absorption isn't touched on until very late into the endgame, after the main narrative is long over, making it obvious that the White Wraith's ability to do this once played a larger role in the story, but it was like cut for some reason. During all this, Nata is, as you'd imagined, incensed at seeing the creature that chased him from his home and killed his fellow villagers. This scene does show how his anger at the monster flourished with each encounter. You do find Nata's people through a passageway in the Ice Shard Cliffs, but not before an odd Rathalos appears. It's colored white and you soon learn it's called a Guardian. Naturally, you kill it and get acquainted with Nata's uncle Tashin. Tashin informs the crew that the Keepers, Nata's tribe, protect an energy source called Wyvern Milk. Yes, milk. That holds all the environment of each region you just passed through in check through a system called the Wormways. And it's all powered by something far underground called the Dragon Torch. What's more, the Keepers watch over synthetic, enhanced forms of monsters encased in cocoons. They only need Wyvern Milk to live. No eating and no reproducing, which in theory makes them controllable. The Guardian Rathalos you defeated is one of these, and so is the White Wraith, also called Arkveld. It woke up and attacked the keepers, leading to Nata fleeing the village and the beginning of this story. Honestly, all this is great, even if wyvern milk sounds a little cheesy. I appreciated how the story was finally leaning into the environmental balance thing a bit more. You can't feel too bad about killing synthetic monsters that are clearly fucking up the environment, right? Wrong. Remember how Nata was quite angry at Arkveld for killing his people and chasing him from his home? Upon realizing that it's an artificial monster learning to live naturally, Nata throws a little fit and decides that everything Arkveld has done is fine because, well, just listen to him explain it.
Arkveld. All I wanted was to be free! And I don't know which of us is worse.
Nata flips the switch, coming to the conclusion that both Arkveld and the Keepers are monsters. Then he starts crying. Now, I'm someone that believes excessive crying equates to lazy storytelling. I challenge you to think of a well-regarded story with a character bawling their eyes out to show how super duper sad they are. Something like The Last of Us is a tale full of tragedy, but it shows sadness in much more meaningful ways. I don't remember any of the characters in Mass Effect sobbing either, though I might have shed a few tears when Mordin Solus said, "Had to be me." Someone else might have gotten it wrong. You get the point. Let's recap. My hunter just slaughtered a couple dozen monsters with Nata in tow, including some other escaped Guardian monsters like Arkveld, and now he cares so deeply about the monster that killed his people and chased him from his home that the waterworks start? Okay, I can see potential in the idea that the creation of these synthetic monsters was bad. However, none of the characters present actually created them. Tashin and the other keepers merely watched over them. So why is Nata mad at them? But anyway, as quickly as Nata's tears come, they dry up, and Tashin reveals that Nata's pendant is somehow special. Before you can learn any more, some Guardian secrets burst from their cocoons and Arkveld itself comes flying in to feast on them. You, as the hunter, chase it away, and Tashin informs the crew that Arkveld's feasting is unprecedented. He sends you off on the most pointless quest in the entire game. You have to find the All-Harken, an old woman with vast knowledge, to uncover whether or not the Guardian monsters have gone rabid like this before. So you don't learn this until a bit later, but Tashin more or less already has all the knowledge the All-Harken imparts. At least you get to fight a massive Jindahad on the way to meet the All-Harken in her Wyverian village, so it wasn't a complete waste of time. Ancient wise elf-eared Grandma is, as you'd expect, an incredibly undercooked character as well. In short, you learn from her that the Dragon Torch produces the wyvern milk that is carried along the wormways throughout all the areas you've passed through. It causes lightning storms to scare off monsters in the Windward Plains, flooding to cleanse the poisons in the Scarlet Forest at the proper time, and so on. This was all created by ancient keepers that eventually caused their own demise by creating a powerful guardian. As the wormways weaken, the ecosystems of these areas begin to falter. This means that it isn't Arkveld destabilizing nature, but a failure of the synthetic energy source, which in turn led to you and your friends dealing with rampaging monsters reacting negatively to this change. Now, as Nata has taken an interest in saving Arkveld despite its rabid nature, the All-Harken points you towards the ruins of Wyveria, right where the Keepers currently live. So he trekked across an icy expanse and fought a massive monster only to learn a little bit about the Dragon Torch and the Wormways, only to double back and head beneath the Keeper's village to the Dragon Torch that Tashin already knows about. Okay, so after defeating a couple of monsters on the way down to the Dragon Torch, the cutscene that triggers once you arrive is a culmination of everything Wild's story gets wrong.
This is the first thing it ever got to decide for itself. To be free, to live strong. Please, don't do this. I'm begging you.
Yes, Nata doesn't want you to kill Arkveld despite it clearly being rabid, slaying other Guardian-type monsters indiscriminately. Despite the fact that it killed its people, and despite the fact that he watched you cut down dozens of monsters, he doesn't want you to kill Arkveld out of some sense of responsibility that the narrative is thrusting on him without any foreshadowing. Like this might have worked if Wilds laid stronger foundations for the environmental themes. Perhaps the villagers you meet could have opposed you killing monsters instead of putting you on a pedestal as a savior. There could have been some repercussions for killing Raydau or Uthduna or New Udra, upsetting the balance of the area and requiring you to fix it. But no, All this monster slaying had positive outcomes. So why would you sympathize with Nata? Why would anyone? This brings to the forefront a direct incompatibility between the narrative and gameplay, like the writers at Capcom didn't understand Monster Hunter when writing it. They twist themselves into giving you an excuse to kill monsters, but then put this whiny child at the center of the story that suddenly doesn't want you to kill the flagship beast. It's a confusing mess. So you, of course, kill Arkveld. With that job done, Nata's dramatics about saving Arkveld do not matter. He's moved on already. No consequence, no stakes, no sensical character development, just some melodrama that's quickly tossed aside. And it gets worse. That massive guardian that destroyed the civilization that created the Wormways and other guardian monsters is encased within the Dragon Torch, and it's absorbing the energy that powers the Wormways. The major and still quite underdeveloped characters up until this point get together to decide what to do. They come up with two solutions: destroy the Dragon Torch to destroy Zoshia within, but permanently upset the ecosystem's balance. Nata's pendant, inexplicably, has the power to do this, and Olivia pushes hard for this option. The other option is to leave the Dragon Torch be and let Zoshia wake up eventually. Zoshia would kill a lot of people, but the Wormways would be fine, presumably. Of course, all these adults leave the choice up to the only child present, Nata, as Gemma here claims they have no right to decide as outsiders, despite our group deciding as outsiders many times already. Nata decides on stopping the Dragon Torch, which would kill Zoshia, despite wanting to save Arkveld literally in the prior cutscene. I swear his character arc gave me whiplash. Fast forward back to the Dragon Torch. While Nata approaches holding his magical pendant, your hunter stops him. There's a third option you see, that a couple of experienced hunters, tribe elders, and some scientific minds didn't reach at their recent meeting. Just kill Zoshia. Do the thing you've done to solve every problem up until this point. What's with all the pretense when it's clear the only solution is to kill the monster? Your pseudo-protagonist hunter, who has no background or character arc, decides to smash the wyvern mill cocoon and solve the problem himself. As such, what was the point of all those previous cutscenes and Nata's entire arc? This not-so-dramatic conclusion highlights how every single character, including Nata, have no real agency in the story. The only agency is the narrative's need to find a way for your hunter to kill more monsters, no matter how nonsensical. Naturally, you kill Zoshia and carve him up for some monster parts. Some tears are shed, Nata pretends like he actually accomplished something, and the ecosystem doesn't entirely collapse. The end. Well, not entirely. There's a whole post-game with high-rank monsters to hunt, and here Wilds falls back on a serviceable, thin plot reminiscent of past games. The ecosystem is still out of whack, and certain monsters like Yian Kutku have invaded areas where they don't belong. Honestly, I enjoyed all this far more than everything that came before. It at least wasn't a disappointing and often nonsensical distraction that failed at conveying a coherent message. In the end, it's obvious the writing team at Capcom had a grand story with solid themes and characters that they wanted to tell, but it all got carved up during the course of development, a common trend in games as gameplay understandably comes first. If I were to make changes even though nobody asked, I would cast your hunter in the role of Nata. After you flee your home from a monster attack, you return years later as a trained monster hunter with a vengeance. The tribes initially oppose you and your bloodthirst and blame you for the recent ecological imbalance. However, you soon prove to them that Arkveld, a monster you have a personal vendetta against, is setting off the apex predators in each region, meaning it isn't you who's responsible, and you build trust with the locals by hunting these monsters and stopping the environmental disasters they're causing. In turn, the villagers help you find your original home in your quest to stop Arkveld. Along the way, side characters like Alma would question the hunter's role in society and whether or not she has any right to interfere in a land not her own, causing some tension between you and her as your hunter is dead set on revenge. Maybe you two split up for a while, only to reconcile later when Arkveld becomes too much of a threat. Much like in the actual story, you find the Keepers and learn that Arkveld was an artificial monster from an ancient civilization, that it is indeed man's fault that the environment is out of whack, leading to one coherent message. Humanity is responsible for ruining the environment, and it's up to humanity to fix it unless it swallows them whole. Okay, sure, this idea is a bit rote, but it's much better than what we actually got. My imaginary version concludes after taking down Arkveld. However, more monsters move in with the predator hierarchy out of whack, leading to the endgame content where you help restore natural order by going up against more dangerous monsters like Zoshia and Gormagala. But you know, this was all just my overly critical opinion. I do enjoy the world of Monster Hunter Wilds quite a lot, and I'm looking forward to playing a ton more in the coming weeks and months. though I have very little hope that the inevitable DLC will have any semblance of a good story. As the foundations to build a great story are here, I have hope that Capcom will learn from the mistakes it made with Wilds, so that Monster Hunter Universe or whatever comes out in 2030 will finally have an engrossing story with memorable characters, rather than this carved up mess. But what did you think about Wild's story? Let me know in the comments below and I'll do my very best to respond. So if you don't know me, my name is Lowell and I'm a freelance game critic for websites like Nintendo Life and PC Games, and I'm also a veteran of many writing workshop classes where I've critiqued so many stories over the years, and I thought about applying that to video game stories. So here I am. If you like what you saw, please like and subscribe because my channel is super tiny and this video took me like literally 10 hours to make. Thanks so much for sticking around. Bye!